breaking news from the United Nations, where the U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley ripped into Iran today. She warned the UN Security Council that it is being played by Iran. Listen to this.
The Security Council has repeatedly passed resolutions aimed at addressing Iranian support for terrorism and regional conflicts. But Iran has repeatedly thumbed its nose at those efforts. Worse, the regime continues to play this council. Iran hides behind its assertion of technical compliance with the nuclear deal while it brazenly violates the other limits on its behavior. And we have allowed them to get away with it. This must stop.
Our senior international correspondent, Fred Pleitgen, is joining us now live from Tehran in Iran. So how has Iran responded, Fred? How are they likely to respond?
Well, we've been scouring the internet and certainly Iranian websites. So far, we haven't seen any direct responses to Ambassador Haley's remarks. However, there was a speech earlier today by the supreme leader, by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, where he certainly talked about some of the things that Ambassador Haley spoke about as well. And you heard there how she was talking about specifically Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. And one of the things that he said is that he said, quote, "The U.S. is very angry because today the Islamic Republic has foiled their plots in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq." That, of course, alluding to the fact that despite what he believes are U.S. efforts, the Iranians see themselves as being stronger than ever before in these two places, of course, supporting the Assad government in Syria and then, of course, the Iraqi government as well in Baghdad. A couple of other things he also spoke about, but certainly ripping into the U.S., ripping into President Trump as well, saying that President Trump, quote, pretends to be an idiot, but the Iranians should not let their guard down. So certainly there were some things that were in Ambassador Haley's speech that the supreme leader here spoke about earlier in the day, but he was definitely speaking about some of that U.S. anger that apparently we saw on display there at the UN, Wolf.
Yeah, we'll see if President Trump responds. I suspect he will. Fred Pleitgen in Tehran, thanks very much. We've got some live pictures coming in from the White House briefing room. We'll likely hear a response from the White House press secretary, Sarah Sanders. She's standing by to answer reporters' questions, including accusations that the president was insensitive to the widow of a fallen U.S. soldier. President says he has proof, but will the White House reveal it?
When you have
the bipartisan health care deal he seemed to support just 24 hours ago today, the president tweeted this about the deal negotiated by Senators Lamar Alexander and Patty Murray, quote, "I am supportive of Lamar as a person and also of the process, but I can never support bailing out insurance companies who have made a fortune with Obamacare." All this comes after he touted the plan as an interim solution to the problems of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. But here's what he also said just a little while ago.
We're going to see the bipartisan, and Lamar Alexander's working on it very hard from our side. And if something can happen, that's fine. But I won't do anything to enrich the insurance companies, because right now the insurance companies are being enriched. They've been enriched by Obamacare like nothing anybody's ever seen before. I am not going to do anything to enrich the insurance companies.
All right, let's bring in our CNN congressional correspondent, Phil Mattingly, and our chief political correspondent, Dana Bash. Phil, so where exactly does the president stand on this bipartisan deal? What's the reaction to his latest statements, which seem to contradict his earlier statements?
Yeah, no question. It's been a bit of a whiplash last 24 hours, and it appears by all accounts, either on Twitter or in his public statements, that the president is opposed. And what the president is opposed to is essentially the crucial component of this deal, the idea that money and funding, the same funding that last week he decided to cut off, at least on the executive branch side of things, serves as a bailout to insurers. Now, that's not exactly what it does. What these payments actually do is they go to insurers, and insurers use them to drop down premiums or help pay down premiums for individuals who are getting plans. And it's worth noting that inside this deal, Wolf, is an actual requirement that insurers can't, quote unquote, double dip. They can't raise premiums while also taking these subsidies. So in talking to Senator Lamar Alexander, the Republican co-sponsor of this bill, he says the issue right now is trying to kind of educate the president, more or less, let him know what's actually in the deal. The reaction on Capitol Hill is not unlike our reaction, which is whiplash. Seemingly, the president was behind this yesterday, and that is a crucial component of this, because if this bill, Wolf, or if this idea ever wants to move forward in any capacity, whether as a standalone bill or as part of some other vehicle, it would require the president essentially insisting upon a vote. Right now, at this moment at least, it's very clear he is not in that place. And because of that, the future of this bill, no matter how much support Senator Lamar Alexander, Senator Patty Murray are able to get from their respective caucuses, there are real questions whether this has any life at all. And Wolf, we talked about this yesterday when this deal first broke. That's just the Senate. That's not counting in the House at all. I've talked to multiple senior Republicans in the House who have said very clearly and unequivocally, this is not something we want to do. The game changer would be the president saying this is something we're doing. As of this moment, the president is most certainly not saying that, Wolf.
Yeah, but he changed his mind overnight. Dana, he can change his mind once again as he gets more explanations from Lamar Alexander. But Phil makes an important point. Even if it were to pass the Senate, it looks like the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, he's not anxious to let it come up for a vote in the House.
Which is a large reason for the whiplash that Phil just described. I think when it comes to the president's public statements, there is definite whiplash, but in the sort of looking behind the scenes, the reporting that I've been doing, and I know Phil did yesterday, not long after the president made his statement saying that he supports this, what the bipartisan negotiators on Capitol Hill call a short-term fix for people who really need help from the federal government for their health insurance, to, saying today that he opposes it. We were getting calls from people behind the scenes saying, no. What really is going on here is that the White House is concerned about enriching the insurance companies. The White House is concerned that there won't be enough conservative support for this deal because of that. When you get into the details of it, the argument that they make is that what the conservatives got in exchange for putting federal dollars back into this pot for low-income Americans is giving states more flexibility on some of the Obamacare regulations. And what White House officials were saying yesterday, well, the states already have those, so we're not really getting enough. And it took until today, both on Twitter and in the soundbite you just played from the president, for the president to start saying that out loud. If you're Lamar Alexander, a very important chair of a very important committee who has been trying really hard to work on this bipartisan short-term solution and has been, according to Ted Barrett, our congressional producer, talking to the president, even this morning, feeling like he was getting there, certainly this is it makes his job a whole lot more difficult. It's already an uphill battle on the Hill, and if you have support from the president and then just seems to evaporate, makes it a lot harder.
Yeah, Lamar Alexander, the Republican from Tennessee, he clearly thought he had the president's backing for this 2-year interim measure, which the president spoke about positively yesterday, not so much today. Dana, the other big issue this week, next week, the coming weeks, tax reform, tax cut. As you know, the president's been meeting today with members of the Senate Finance Committee, Democrats and Republicans. Can he get enough lawmakers on board with his plan, which he's introduced in general terms?
Unclear. That's the answer at this point. And one of the main reasons why it's unclear if the president can get enough lawmakers on board with his plan is because the plan really is just a framework. As you said, we don't have a lot of the details. And even senators, both Republicans and some Democrats who are quite interested in the notion of tax reform, those especially from red states, those who are up for re-election next year, are reluctant to sign on something where they don't know what that something is. And so that's a big issue. In terms of the substance, and in terms of just the raw politics, our Jeff Zeleny was hearing something that was very interesting from the White House that ties to these two issues we've been talking about together, which is a bit of concern that if the president signs on to even a short-term health care fix and has another loss, it would be a third very public, very embarrassing loss that would even be a bigger setback for the notion of momentum for a big legislative victory on tax reform. So it's very unclear how it's going to go. A lot of it is about the details, and the question is how they get to those details. And the give and take, which is supposed to happen, is occurring right now to try to find a way to get a path to passing the Senate and the House. They're not even close to getting there yet.
Important point. Dana, thanks very much. And to our viewers, be sure to tune in later tonight when Dana and Jake Tapper moderate a CNN debate night special. Is the GOP tax plan good for the middle class? Can Republicans deliver on President Trump's promise? Senators Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz, they take sides in a live CNN debate later tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern. Just ahead, Iran's supreme leader slamming President Trump in a televised speech to his country. Also, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, is lashing out at Iran before the UN Security Council. We'll have a live report from Iran. Plus, we're standing by. The NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, he's expected to weigh in any minute after the president slammed the decision to allow players to kneel during the playing of the national anthem. All that live coming up.
Tonight.
Committee, Senator Blumenthal, a member of the committee, questioning the Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
Been contacted to request an interview with you by the special counsel. That's a yes or no.
Well, I don't think so.
You don't think so? Are you sure? I'm asking you this question multiple times so that you can be clear.
I'm perfectly willing to respond to the special counsel in any way, but I don't recall that I have been contacted. I certainly have not spoken directly with anybody in the special counsel.
But the fact of the matter is the special counsel has asked your office for an interview with you, correct?
I'll be glad to let you know within hours.
Well, I'm asking you now.
Well, I don't know. I don't recall that I've ever been asked to provide any interview with the special counsel. You seem to know, so I don't want to come in here and be trapped and you know something I don't know. Maybe shared it with somebody in my office or something. So I would, check and let you know.
It would make sense for the special counsel to ask for an interview, correct?
Well, that is his decision, not mine. So.
You have knowledge relevant to the investigation into collusion and potential obstruction of justice, correct?
It would be up to the special counsel, obviously, not me.
The question to you was whether your office has been contacted, and you would certainly know the answer to that question.
Well, I have no knowledge of any meeting, interview to be conducted, and no date certainly has been set for one. And whether there's been any conversation with somebody, I would verify before I gave you an absolute final answer. What more can I tell you?
Can you give him an answer before the day's out?
Yes, I can. I said within hours. I can do that.
Okay.
I just would like to check. You seem to know. Do you have a source?
Well, Mr. Attorney General, with all due respect, you're the one answering the questions here today. I will welcome an answer to my question as soon as possible following this hearing, as the chairman has suggested, and as I think you've agreed. Let me ask you, my understanding is that the President of the United States has interviewed a number of candidates for United States attorney positions around the country, including New York. Is that correct?
I believe that's, yes. We've done quite a number. Not there yet, not complete, but working through the U.S. attorney process.
Isn't that quite unusual for the President of the United States to interview the line prosecutor in an office like United States Attorney?
Well, it's a big district, big state, important office, but I don't know how many people the U.S. Attorney, the President of the United States has interviewed in these situations. It is his appointment, as you know. What we do in the Department of Justice is do a review. We send that over, and the President makes the appointment.
Do you know of any president anywhere in our history previously interviewing a candidate for United States Attorney? I certainly wasn't interviewed by the President. You weren't interviewed by the President before we were appointed United States Attorney. Has it ever happened before?
Well, a lot of them new candidates, as you well know. A lot of them, the U.S. attorneys are friends of presidents, friends of families of the president.
You're not answering my question.
Well,
you are correct that presidents sometimes know candidates for United States Attorney. But to my knowledge, no president previously has ever interviewed the chief federal prosecutor in any United States attorney district. I consider it quite unusual. How many other attorneys general candidates has the president interviewed besides New York?
I'm not aware. I'm not sure I remember whether he had interviewed for New York, but if you say so, assume so. And he has the right to, for sure, because he has to make an appointment. And I assume that everybody would understand that.
My understanding, General Sessions, is that certain grants have been terminated to the city of New York because of its alleged violation of sanctuary cities policies, correct?
We're at a point of reviewing those grants, and I don't know, and they may well have been slowed under review, but it could be that a final decision has been made. New York was on the list of one of the cities that was considered to be probably in violation of the existing law 1373 under the Obama administration. We've reviewed those. A number of them have not been,
but
have gotten off the list,
in New
and we'll
York
be okay.
have stayed such an order stopping any grants to New York. And I'm asking you whether the Department of Justice is potentially violating that order. If you could come back to me with a response, I know that you may not recall, but if you also could let me know about that, I'd appreciate it. Let me just say.
I would just say, Senator Blumenthal, my staff handed me a note that I have not been asked for an interview at this point. My office certainly hadn't been contacted with regard to that. Maybe you better check your source.
Let me ask you finally. You said that the pardon power is very broad, but if that pardon power were used to prevent or forestall testimony in a lawful investigation, that could be obstruction of justice, could it not?
I wouldn't dare answer me.
I don't know, Senator Blumenthal. I've never researched that. I have heard it said. I know you've served in the Department of Justice as United States Attorney, and you may well be more familiar than I with it. But I have understood that my understanding is that a pardon can be issued before a conviction occurs. Do you understand it that way?
I'm going to, since I'm over my time, I'll come back to this issue in our subsequent questioning. Thank you.
Another tense exchange between this time Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut and the Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Blumenthal suggesting that Sessions already has been asked to do an interview with the special counsel Robert Mueller. You just heard, got a statement from a staff member saying there's been no such request. Our own Jessica Schneider, our justice correspondent, just got a statement from the Department of Justice saying that Sessions has not been interviewed by the special counsel Robert Mueller and has not been asked for one either. And you heard Attorney General Sessions say, go to Blumenthal, go check your sources, because he has not been asked for an interview by the special counsel. It may happen down the road, and Sessions said he would fully cooperate with the special counsel if asked. So far, he has not been asked. As we continue to monitor this hearing, there's another major live event happening any moment now. The National Football League commissioner set to respond to the president who's been blasting the league's decision on players protesting during the national anthem. The NFL says it won't require players to stand during the national anthem. And today the president tweeted this once again. The NFL has decided that it will not force players to stand for the playing of our national anthem. Total disrespect for our great country. Jason Reed is a senior NFL writer for ESPN's The Undefeated. He's joining us now live from New York, where the team owners have been meeting with the NFL Commissioner, Roger Goodell. Jason, we're going to hear from him momentarily. So tell her what you've learned. Why did the league decide not to force the players to stand?
Well, Wolf, there's no mechanism for them to force the players to stand. In the NFL game operations manual, what it says is that players must be on the field and that they should stand. So effectively, they would have to rewrite the rule book the game operations manual during the season. And then there's a question of the pushback that they would get from the players, the NFL Players Association. So to try to force the players to try to stand, I think the owners and Commissioner Goodell just decided that that was not a bridge, that they wanted to go down. That was not a hill they wanted to die on.
What is the league doing, Jason, in response to all the issues that have emerged involving these protests?
Well, there was a very productive meeting yesterday. That's the way it was characterized by both the Players Association, players, and the NFL, that the sides talked about what they can do moving forward to try to help the players with the issues that they have. The players are very interested in criminal justice reform. They want the NFL effectively to partner with them in kind of helping to get these things done that they want to get done about criminal justice reform, education reform, bridging the gap in communities with regard to policing. So the players feel like the NFL has these immense resources, and they are a big part of the NFL, these players, that they want the league to really join them in helping them do things in the communities that will improve the lives of others.
All right, Jason, I want you to stand by because we're waiting to hear from Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, see what decisions they've made. We'll discuss with you after that. Stand by. There's other news we're following. One day after endorsing a bipartisan deal on health care, President Trump now reversing his support. You're going to hear why and whether the deal now is in serious trouble. Dana Bash and Phil Mattingly, they'll join us next.
Scarves off.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions in the hot seat this hour, being grilled by members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Moments ago, there was a pretty fiery exchange between Sessions and Democratic Senator Al Franken about meetings Sessions had with Russian officials during the 2016 election.
First it was, I did not have communications with Russians, which was not true. Then it was, I never met with any Russians to discuss any political campaign, which may or may not be true. Now it's, I did not discuss interference in the campaign, which further narrows your initial blanket denial about meeting with the Russians. Since you have qualified your denial to say that you did not, quote, discuss issues of the campaign with Russians, what, in your view, constitutes issues of the campaign?
Well, let me just say this without hesitation, that I conducted no improper discussions with Russians at any time regarding a campaign or any other item facing this country.
Okay, how do you know?
I want to say that first. And that's been the suggestion that you've raised and others, that it was somehow we had conversations that were improper.
May I suggest that...
No, you had a long time, Senator Franken. I'd like to respond.
Okay.
I think I have a...
Well, note that Senator Cruz went 2 minutes over, so I don't want...
Well,
they're going to cut me off, and so I want to ask you some questions.
No, I don't, Mr. Chairman, I don't have to sit in here and listen to his
You're the one who testified.
charges without having a chance to respond.
He did respond at length after that exchange. Joining us now, our legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Laura Coates and CNN contributor Garrett Graff. Laura, Sessions testified earlier this year that he had no communications with the Russians in that one exchange that he had. That's now changed, that he had no improper communications, and he explained his thinking along those lines during that lengthy exchange he had. Has the Attorney General's story changed, in your opinion, so much that potentially it could be considered perjury?
At this point, from what he's given is a string of contingencies that, frankly, and caveats here, which, lawyers are infamous for giving, and he, in fact, is the head lawyer in town as the Attorney General. What it sounds like to me is less of perjury and more of somebody who is giving a more nuanced description of his activity in a way that has been vetted, in a way that takes into account allegations of perjury, and in a way that suggests that he, in fact, is not involved. So I think it's more of an appropriate assessment of his statement to say that it's nuanced nuance, it gives caveats, and tries to distance himself from something that is obviously a criminal probe that he has recused himself from. But politically speaking, it certainly raises more than a few eyebrows that someone's story could change so dramatically on a turn of semantics. That's not going to get him very far if, in fact, he does get interviewed by someone like Special Counsel Robert Mueller.
Yeah, and he had all the transcripts right in front of them. He read those exchanges. He had his explanations. But, Garrett, what does all this do to the Attorney General's credibility?
Well, I think one of the things that's really worth thinking about in the context of this hearing today was just how combative this hearing actually was. I mean, Jeff Sessions just a few months ago was sitting with these senators. I mean, he was part of this club, and normally you don't see members of this club turn on another in the way that ends in a hearing as combative as today was. I mean, at a different point in the hearing, Dick Durbin, senator from Illinois, was actually said, this is the point, Mr. Sessions, where Senator Sessions would have gotten very frustrated with an uncooperative witness.
And Laura, there was an exchange earlier in the day. Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont, he pressed Sessions on the meetings that he did have with the Russians. Listen to this.
Have you discussed with him any policies or positions of the campaign or Trump presidency?
I'm not sure about that. If I met with the Russian ambassador after I gave a speech at the Republican convention, he was right in front of the speakerphone, and we had we had an encounter there. I don't think there was any discussion about the details of the campaign, other than it could have been that in that meeting in my office or at the convention that some comment was made about what Trump's positions were. I think that's possible.
So what does Special Counsel Robert Mueller do with this, if anything?
Well, we're all juries in this court of public opinion for now. And if you're watching somebody who's able to make such emphatic statements about the recollection in their memories on one area, but they're unable to do so in more critical areas, it does tend to undermine your credibility in all of our eyes. But also importantly here, you have somebody who seems to have learned from his prior testimony. And his prior testimony, we locked himself into a position that could suggest that he somehow was complicit in improper behavior. He knew what happened, and the consequences were vast and continuing. But here he knows that you have Special Counsel Robert Mueller, who's looking at what he says, he's deciphering it, he's looking for every certain avenue he may partake in, and you have someone who's more likely to hedge, and you saw that just now. So if I'm Robert Mueller's team, I'm thinking to myself, what is it about this line of questioning that has you hedging? But everything else, your recollection is quite outstanding.
He did say in response to questioning the Attorney General that if called to answer questions by the Special Counsel Robert Mueller, absolutely he'd be happy to cooperate. But he did, Garrett, keep refusing to talk about his private conversations with President Trump. Can he do that?
It's sort of unclear at this point because it seems like that assertion of executive privilege would need to come from the White House, and it's not something that he can do personally. But there is a lot of questions. There are a lot of questions about those conversations and what part of the Jim Comey firing in particular that Jeff Sessions was part of, because in theory, and he reiterated this today during the hearing, he is supposed to be fully recused from the Russia investigation, and it's supposed to be run by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and the intersection of the firing of Jim Comey with the Russia investigation is very central to the questions that Robert Mueller, as special counsel, is examining right now.
Garrett Graff, Laura Coates, guys, thanks very much. This conversation, no doubt, will continue. In the meantime, President Trump once again blasting the NFL, calling them disrespectful for not forcing the players to stand during the national anthem. And any moment now, you're looking at live pictures. The NFL Commissioner, Roger Goodell, will weigh in publicly. We'll take it live. Much more right after this. Hello, I'm Wolf Blitzer. It's 1 p.m. here in Washington, 6 p.m. in Niamey, Niger, 8:30 p.m. in Tehran. Wherever you're watching from around the world, thanks very much for joining us. President Trump now picking a fight with a Florida congresswoman after being slammed for his comments to the widow of a U.S. soldier killed in an ambush in Niger. Sergeant David Johnson was killed in the ambush along with 3 other U.S. soldiers. His body was returned home to Miami on Tuesday. In the drive to the airport, Sergeant Johnson's widow received a call from President Donald Trump. Congresswoman Frederica Wilson was also in the car. She says she heard the president tell the widow that her husband knew what he was signing up for, but it still hurts.
For him to say that this young man stayed in school, did all the right things, went into the service, became a sergeant so quickly that he signed up for his own death? That is so insensitive.
How did she hear it? What was her response?
She was crying. She broke down. And she said he didn't even know his name.
President Trump strongly disputes that claim, tweeting, quote, Democratic Congresswoman totally fabricated what I said to the wife of a soldier who died in action, and I have proof. Sad. We did hear from a family member who was also in the car during the call, and she tells CNN that Congresswoman Wilson's recollection is, quote, very accurate. Our senior White House correspondent Jeff Zeleny is joining us now from the White House. Jeff, we saw the president's tweet. Since then, he was asked another question, and he responded. Tell our viewers what he said.
Good afternoon, Wolf. He did. He was meeting with the Senate Finance Committee a short time ago in the cabinet room here at the White House. And we did ask the president about this unusual back and forth between the congresswoman, the mother of this fallen soldier, and the president. This is what he said.
I did not say what she said. And I'd like her to make the statement again, because I did not say what she said. I had a very nice conversation with the woman, with the wife, who sounded like a lovely woman, did not say what the congresswoman said, and most people aren't too surprised to hear that.
So, Wolf, the back and forth continued with the member of Congress from Florida, Representative Wilson, responding to the president on social media, on Twitter. She said this. She said, I stand by my account of the call between President Trump and Maisha Johnson. That is the widow of the soldier. That is her name, Mr. Trump, not the woman or the wife. So again, Wolf, just to sort of try and break this all down here, this confusing and unfortunate back and forth, we have the Democratic congresswoman who has known this family for a very long time, and he was a mentor to this fallen soldier, and the widow of the soldier and the mother, the woman who raised him, saying that the president did indeed, in their words, disrespect the soldier. The president said he didn't say that. He said there was proof of that phone call, again raising the specter of if these calls were recorded or something. He did not elaborate on that. But, Wolf, I think there will be more questions on this afternoon at the White House press briefing that Sarah Sanders is holding. But, Wolf, again, it sort of all this back and forth sort of masks all the deep, serious questions about what happened on that night in Niger, what happened to cause the deaths of these 4 American soldiers. Important to point out that investigation is underway as all of this noise, if you will, is going on here in Washington. Yeah, very, very unfortunate and very painful noise. The exact tweet that he wrote, Democrat Congresswoman totally fabricated what I said to the wife of a soldier who died in action, and I have proof. Sad. So is he suggesting that that conversation was recorded? They have a recording? Is that what he's suggesting? Well, Wolf, that certainly sounded like it. Of course, it sounds familiar. The president has previously said that he's had recordings of phone conversations, but a reporter this morning, again in the cabinet room here at the White House, the only time we've seen the president, asked him what proof he indeed had, and he said, you will see. But again, Wolf, this simply raises the specter of if he's recording phone calls or if someone was taking notes at the time. We don't know the answer to that. I believe the White House press secretary, Sarah Sanders, will be asked about that this afternoon. But again, Wolf, I think important to point out, a lot of this back and forth here does not change the fact that this young American soldier died in action. And again, the Pentagon investigating, and indeed this investigation will surely reach Capitol Hill as well. What happened to those soldiers in Niger?
Yeah, what were they doing there to begin with? That's another issue that needs to be investigated. Did they have the proper support? Was the U.S. intelligence adequate? Clearly a very, very dangerous mission inside Niger. Jeff Zeleny, thanks very much. And let's not forget what is at the heart of this back and forth. Once again, the death of these 4 U.S. soldiers, Sergeant David Johnson. Army Staff Sergeant Dustin Wright, Army Staff Sergeant Jeremiah Johnson, and Army Staff Sergeant Brian Black, all killed in this ambush in Niger. It's an incident the President of the United States didn't mention or tweet about for some 12 days until he was asked about it by our own Sarah Murray at that news conference the other day. I want to bring in John Kirby. He's our CNN military and diplomatic analyst, a former spokesman for both the State Department and the Pentagon, a retired U.S. admiral. You know, John, this has become a major issue now for the President. Is there a set protocol, as far as you know, for a president to follow when contacting the family of a fallen U.S. soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine?
I don't think there's a set protocol for all presidents. Every president handles this differently. And so obviously it looks like President Trump has chosen that he's going to make these phone calls and write those letters, and that's perfectly fine. That's what a commander-in-chief should do, is find a way to appropriately reach out to the families of the fallen when and where he or she can. But there's no set protocol for all presidents.
When it comes to your background, 30 years in the U.S. military and the Navy, when you hear of this kind of political bickering that's going on about phone calls and letters to the families of the fallen, what goes through your mind?
It breaks my heart, Wolf. I mean, it just absolutely, this whole sad situation just breaks my heart. And I find it utterly disgraceful, frankly, that this family and all those families are being put in the middle of what is basically a political fight. It just shouldn't happen that way. You look at those images of the young woman leaning over the casket, pregnant with a child that will never know his or her father. She has a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. Never see their daddy again. That's what the focus needs to be on. That's where America needs to be focused. And the military will wrap their arms around these poor, unfortunate families, and they'll help them through this. But we've got to focus on their grief and their needs and the support that they need going forward. Not what was said on the call and how it was perceived. That's really just not important right now. What's important is this family.
Good point. Congresswoman Wilson says she wanted to speak with the president during that call in the car. There's a speakerphone there, but the master sergeant, who was the liaison to the family, accompanying the family in the car, said he wouldn't allow it. Explain why that master sergeant wouldn't let the congresswoman who mentored this young man speak with the president.
Because it's a private conversation between the commander-in-chief and the family of the fallen. My guess is this master sergeant is what we call a casualty assistance case officer, CACO, if you will. Their whole job is to do exactly what we were talking about a few minutes ago, to wrap their arms around the family. We do wrap their arms around this family, and that's what he was doing. It's appropriate for him to not have allowed anybody else to be on that call.
President Trump, as you know, he seemed to go after his predecessor, former President Barack Obama, even questioning whether General John Kelly, his White House chief of staff, was called after his son was killed in the line of duty in Afghanistan back in 2010. Senator Lindsey Graham defended President Obama, saying he definitely cared about U.S. troops. You were there at the Pentagon, later at the State Department. Give us a sense of how President Obama handled these kinds of so sensitive situations.
He was dignified, Wolf. He was respectful, and he was quiet about it. He visited families out at Section 60. Whenever he would travel to bases here in the United States, he would always carve out time to meet with families of the fallen that might be living or near that base. He obviously made phone calls as well when it was appropriate. He certainly wrote condolence letters. And he went to Walter Reed, as you know, Wolf, many, many times during his presidency to meet with the wounded as well and their families. But he was always low-key about it, always quiet about it. This was a dignified thing for him, a duty that he took very seriously as commander-in-chief, and he would never, ever try to score political points as a result of it. Never saw him do that.
Remind our viewers what Section 60 is.
I'm sorry. Section 60 is that area of the Arlington National Cemetery here in Washington where most of those who fell in Iraq and Afghanistan are now resting. And it's sort of a section that's almost completely just the fallen from Iraq and Afghanistan.
And there are unfortunately thousands of U.S. military personnel over these many years who have now died and they are now buried at Arlington National Cemetery in Section 60. John Kirby, thanks very much. We're going to have much more on this, much more on the breaking news coming in from Capitol Hill, including President Trump now reversing himself on a bipartisan health care deal. But first, I want to take a moment to honor the U.S. soldier, the family he leaves behind, his wife just 24 years old and 6 months pregnant. They also have 2 children together, including a 6-year-old daughter who was at her mother's side when her father's casket arrived back here in the United States. Please watch the solemn ceremony, a ceremony no military family wants to witness.
This morning, the president with a fresh attack on the NFL. He writes, the NFL has decided that it will not force players to stand for the playing of our national anthem. Total disrespect for our great country.
So it's not just the NFL. The NBA tipped off its season opener with players making their own statement. The Cleveland Cavaliers locking arms during the anthem. Let's go to Coy Wire for more on what could be ahead. Coy.
Hi, Poppy. Hi, John. The NBA has a rule that players must stand for the national anthem, but they're able to make their statements in other ways. For LeBron James last night in the NBA season opener, he's wearing shoes with equality across the back. Now, the NFL, it does not have such a rule requiring players to stand for the anthem, but some wondered if a rule forcing players to stand would be discussed at yesterday's meeting between owners and players. The topic wasn't even discussed. The aim of the meeting was to get the focus back on the original intention of the protests, which was shedding light on racial and socioeconomic inequities in America and figuring out how the league and the owners can best help players help people in their communities. Eagles safety Malcolm Jenkins was at the meeting. Here's some of what he said was discussed.
The players and the owners came to an agreement that these aren't really issues that are player issues or owner issues or community issues. They're issues that affect all of us in our communities.
We'll continue to talk over the next few weeks about how we can collaborate in making sure that we tell the stories the right way, that we take ownership in the narrative, and that we clearly express to our country what the work is that we're trying to do.
Of the 12 or 13 players who were at the meetings, one notable not there, Colin Kaepernick, whose attorney said that the former 49er who first started the movement of protesting during the anthem was not invited by the league, but Jenkins, from whom you just heard, said that Kaepernick was invited by the players and did not know why Kaepernick didn't show up. Kaepernick, of course, remains unsigned and has filed a collusion grievance against the owners.
Coy Wire, thank you. Keep us
Welcome.
posted. We appreciate it. All right, we are moments away from the...
People are talking a lot about the food scene here.
Following 2 developing stories this morning. First, the investigation into the death of 4 American heroes, 4 soldiers in Niger, and now the controversy surrounding what President Trump did or did not say to the widow of Sergeant LaDavid Johnson.
In the middle of all that, in just about 30 minutes, the Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, he will be in the hot seat, a Senate hearing where he will face questions on the Russia investigation, among other things. Joining us now, CNN political commentators Alice Stewart and Paul Begala. Now, as we often say, despite what's going on with the controversy over what he did or did not say to this widow, or maybe because of it, the president has been active this morning, making statements on Twitter, this time about the Russia investigation and former FBI Director James Comey. Let me give you a dramatic reading. Wow, FBI confirms report that James Comey drafted letter exonerating crooked Hillary long before investigation was complete. Many people not interviewed, including Clinton herself. Comey stated under oath that he didn't do this, obviously a fix. And here's the kicker, with Jeff Sessions headed up to Capitol Hill. Where is Justice Department? All right, Paul. What's going on here? Is he doing this to distract from what's going on over Niger? Is he doing this to get the Senate to ask questions about James Comey, or what?
I think he's panicked about Russia. He's getting heat about the way he allegedly hurt the feelings of a Gold Star wife. But I think this is about Russia. The circle is tightening. His former chief of staff has been interviewed by Mr. Mueller. His press secretary, former press secretary, now has been interviewed by Mr. Mueller. Mueller's going to have all the facts. And so I think President Trump is trying to lay out some way to counterattack. It's all he knows how to do. But it seems to me a pretty weak counterattack. Say, well, James Comey. By the way, Democrats don't like James Comey either. He'll find a receptive audience to criticism of James Comey. It doesn't mean that he did not obstruct justice when he fired James Comey. That's what people want to know. I'm not saying he did, but that's where the investigation seems to be leading to me.
All right, two facts here. One is the timeline. We know from our reporting, from what the FBI has posted publicly in the last week, that on May 2nd, James Comey, when he was FBI chief, started to draft this reasoning, this reasoning as to why eventually Hillary Clinton may be exonerated. Then July 2nd, a few months later, they interview Clinton. July 5th, he announces that he would not recommend charges. So the president's right in his tweets that this drafting did happen before. However, he's wrong when he says Comey testified as such and Comey was lying that he decided before. Here is that part of that testimony with Comey. Listen to this.
Director, did you make the decision not to recommend criminal charges relating to classified information before or after Hillary Clinton was interviewed by the FBI on July the 2nd?
After.
Now, the president says Comey stated under oath that he didn't do this. Alice, what questions should Sessions face on all of this today?
I think that the difficulty that Sessions is in with regard to the Russia investigation and the probe is that he's in a tight spot, given that he was on the campaign while a lot of this was going on. He's recused himself from the investigation and being involved in this, so he's in a difficult spot. I think clearly he needs to come clean with all of his information. We have to remember there are a couple of investigations going on. There's the one going on in Congress, and then there's the Mueller investigation. I think from what I hear with the investigation going on with House and Senate members, that is nearing its completion. Possibly by the end of November, they have about 24 more witnesses. And from what I hear, they are going to lean toward no collusion. But that is separate from what we have with the Mueller investigation. I do think that the president is concerned about what will come out of the Mueller investigation. He is convinced that this in some way, shape, or form indicates that he didn't win the election fair and square, and there's absolutely no connection whatsoever. He won the election because he connected with the American people, he worked hard, and he won the Electoral College. But in his view, he looks at this as a slap in the face to his victory in the election. That's why, in my view, that's why he wants to steer clear of conversations about
He
this.
won the election because James Comey smeared Hillary Clinton at the end. He owes his presidency to James Comey and Vladimir Putin. Without those two, I mean, he couldn't beat Clinton and Kane. He needed Putin and Comey. But James Comey, this is not just me. 538, the nonpartisan nerd site that looks at this stuff, you can see when.
And we stand united.